The theme of fasting is addressed in today's gospel reading, and it's kind of necessary that we fast, that we practice fasting. And notice how our Lord says that when the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast on that day. So our Lord is reaffirming the importance, the benefit of fasting, and pointing out that his disciples will fast in days to come, but not right now. And notice how he says, the wedding guests cannot fast while the bridegroom is with them, can they? So notice he's referring to marriage, and in the Jewish tradition, marriage was celebrated for an entire week. So during that time, whoever attended the wedding would have been dispensed from their fasting. And, this was understood by the Jewish people. And, where there's those parables when, the parable of the great king who's going to have a wedding for his son, and he sends his servants to invite people to come to the wedding, and people say no, and they make excuses. It would be so appealing to go because you wouldn't have to fast. So not just because it's the wedding feast of a great king, not just because there's going to be luxurious food, but you also would be dispensed from fasting for that entire week. So getting back to the theme of fasting, though, it's interesting that all the major religions of the world practice some form of fasting. In other words, all the major religions recognize the importance and benefit of fasting. It's interesting that in the early church, in the early Catholic Church, Christians would fast 3 times a week. The Jewish tradition was that you had to fast twice a week. And if you recall, there's that parable our Lord gives of the Pharisee and the tax collector who go up and pray in the temple, and the Pharisee is boasting before God, "Oh, I'm not like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I give tithes," and all these things. So he acknowledges that he fasts twice a week. Meanwhile, here's our Lord with his disciples, and they are not fasting. And the question is why? So the wedding guests, so our Lord alludes to a wedding, and so the wedding guests cannot fast while the bridegroom is with them. In other words, kind of like they're in the process of celebrating the wedding between Christ and his bride, the church. So it's the wedding celebration that is taking place. Now, when our Lord says that the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast on that day. So I mentioned this refers to after the time of Christ, but it's also the day on which the bridegroom is taken away from them, which is Good Friday. And, going back to how did the practice of fasting originate in all these different religions? And part of it goes back to, if we think back in the book of Genesis, Cain and Abel, they offer sacrifice to God, and Cain's sacrifice is not acceptable to God, whereas Abel's sacrifice is. But why were they offering sacrifice to begin with? And part of it was to acknowledge that everything they have belongs to God. But also, it's symbolic of the fact that when we deny ourselves of some good and we offer that good to someone else, we're hoping to gain the favor of that other person. So, if I do something that is very sacrificial for someone, they're going to be more likely to return the favor to me. So this kind of principle. And this is where the idea of offering sacrifices to the false gods also comes from. We sacrifice something that we value, and we hope to get something back of equal or greater value. And so in the pagan religions, they would even sacrifice their own children. But this sacrifice, when we have an abundance, it's easy. And this is why for the Jewish people, it was the first fruits of the flock, or in other words, the best was given to God to indicate that it's a sacrifice. But it's easy to give from one's abundance. But you see, when we deny ourselves food, it's like we really feel it. In other words, that's a real sacrifice. We may have an abundance where we're going to deny ourselves that abundance. So that's one reason. But the other reason is that sometimes when we're brokenhearted or sometimes we do something terrible and we just feel so bad, we're just so sick to our stomach that we simply cannot eat. And this can happen, What happened on Good Friday? Our Lord is arrested, and the world of the apostles is shattered because they had put so much hope into our Lord, and all of a sudden he's arrested, and it's like they don't know what to do. I imagine they probably didn't eat or ate very little on that day. They probably fasted unintentionally. Okay, so fasting is also a sign of grief or sorrow or mourning, not just when we are actually feeling that, but to indicate that we are mourning. So if you recall King David, when it's revealed to him that his son is going to die, he fasts, he refuses to eat, he puts on sackcloth and ashes, covers himself in ashes, hoping to appease God, hoping that his child will be spared. His child is not spared, but the punishment against David is alleviated because of his manifestation of sorrow for his sins. So fasting is both sacrificial, but also a manifestation of sorrow for sin. And there are many benefits to fasting. Even from the physiological perspective, we give our body a chance to recuperate, our organs to cleanse themselves. So fasting is actually recommended by healthcare professionals. It's good for us. What we are encouraged to do is when we fast for spiritual reasons. Sometimes when people are motivated to fast for physical reasons, as a Christian or as a Catholic, you could say, okay, I'm going to fast for both reasons. I'm going to offer this fast to God, but also for the health benefits that come from it. And of course, there are different kinds of fasting, and the fasting that is required of us today is like so easy. Like one full meal and 2 small meals that don't add up to a full meal. Like, that's so easy. Most people eat that way anyways to begin with. So, in the early church, they didn't eat anything. They fasted 3 times a week, and during Lent, it was every single day. The other thing is that when we fast, it actually clears our brain because the blood is purified, and it makes it easier for us to focus. It actually makes it easier for us to pray. So when we're fasting for the sake of God, God is going to compensate us by enabling us to pray more energetically or more fully or with greater focus and intention. So not just because our blood is cleansed, but God will help us in that process of fasting. And the other thing about fasting is it helps us to gain self-mastery and self-control. So by saying no to the temptation to eat, it strengthens us to say no to other temptations. So it enables us to do that, to greater self-control, greater self-mastery, but also greater detachment from the goods of this world. We learn to enjoy the things of God more fully, especially because our prayer life becomes more intensified because of our fasting. So we realize the things of this world don't make us happy. The things of God do. So it makes it easier for us, for that reason also, to avoid temptation or to avoid worldly allurements. So there's many, many benefits to fasting, but the problem is we don't practice it. Now, getting back to what I said, the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from, and I referred to Good Friday. And this is why every Friday is also a day of abstinence from meat. Like, so easy to do, right? And a lot of people can't do it. So yes, you are permitted to substitute some other penance, and it should be something that's challenging, because we just live in this luxurious world. We have everything at our fingertips. You just need to open the fridge. You can go to the grocery store and stock up on groceries. At the time of our Lord, people had to struggle. They had to, labor in the fields and ensure that they would have enough supply of grain for the coming winter, and all these things. They were in danger of being attacked and all their goods taken away, or sometimes the crops were destroyed for whatever reason, and there was a famine. People lived very harsh conditions in the past. We have it so easy, and we complain about the slightest hunger that we might feel. Like we're wimps. We're spiritual wimps. There is a need for fasting. There's a benefit to fasting. There's a benefit to practicing self-denial. There's a benefit to offering sacrifices to God, especially those sacrifices that cause us discomfort. So let us do what we can to have greater self-control, self-mastery, but also let us give ourselves over to greater detachment from the things of this world, including self-denial, such as fasting or abstinence on Fridays.